It is, oh my gosh, I'm 1 minute late. 7:31, and it is time to find a fairy tale and slay some dragons. And tonight's guest is author Jeff Zentner. He's written 3 books, soon to be 4 young adult novels. And he is a lawyer by day, a novelist by night. So I definitely find a kindred spirit in the fact that he juggles a day job, a night job, a family, and everything in between. I met him at a young adult festival last year, and I was struck by something he said about the job and the duty of authors and artists to help create empathy in society and in our lives. And I wanted to talk to him this week to sort of set the stage as to what this is all about, since this is launch week, and to bring into everybody's kind of daily lives. How do I start over? How do I just start? How do I change gears? Because if you will notice in his books, any of you who are familiar with his various young adult novels, his teenage characters, they're definitely a little bit of philosophers as well. So I want to introduce you to a little bit of Jeff Zentner's philosophy on life. And joining us live right now. And you know what's so great about technology is that we can chat like this even in the middle of a pandemic.
Hey,
Hi,
Sorboni.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
You know, life is weird. Life is good.
You're so good at TV. I don't think I've ever seen you on TV.
Oh, the TV. I need to actually turn off the TV because this is writing world right here. And
Gotcha.
There's a quick set change. Like if we just rotate right here, that is the newsroom, a la the image in a giant monitor that lives in my writing room and competes for attention. So now it's off and we're on, and we have our books behind, your books behind me.
Hey, it's my books.
It is. And you know, one of the books that I read was about a young teenager who wanted to be on TV. And I definitely found a lot of humor in that. So introducing you, though, first of all, to everybody who's watching. You are a lawyer. You are a writer. You're a singer-songwriter, even though you try to keep that a secret because it was chapter 1 in your story.
That's right.
How do you go from singer-songwriter to award-winning author?
So, and first of all, thank you for doing this with me. This is a real honor to get to do this. It's been almost exactly a year since we last hung out, right? It was in Chattanooga in September of last year, right?
Yeah, when things were normal, and I was a debut author, and you were kind enough to write a nice thing about my book. They call it a blurb. For those of you who don't know, I didn't know. My editor told me, hey, you've got to reach out and ask for authors that you like to blurb your book. And I was like, what in the world is a blurb used in this grammatical sense? And she said, it's the quote on the book where they say, hey, read it. And you and a couple other authors were kind enough to give me a chance and write on it, and then invite me to a festival where I made friends that you're all stuck with me for life. I will bug you for life.
Well, it's fine to be stuck with you. So, so how did I become an author? So like you said, I started life as a musician. I began my musical journey in my teen years. When I was 17, 18 years old, I bought myself a guitar and I started teaching myself how to play. And I practiced for hours and hours a day. And I moved to Nashville in my 20s with kind of the dream of making it big as a musician. That was the goal, is to be a professional musician. So I started playing shows and I put a band together, and we started performing and touring and all those good things that you need to do to be a professional musician. I was recording albums, writing songs, all that good stuff. And we were having a great time. We recorded a couple albums. We got good press, all that. Had a lot of fun. So I hit age 30. And one night I'm lying there in bed at age 30, and I have one of those epiphanies that you sometimes have just out of the blue, where you'll just be engaged in some pedestrian activity and the universe will open its windows to you and allow you to appreciate some great truth that you'd never appreciated before. So I'm laying there in bed at age 30, and I realize all of a sudden that I did not listen to very many musicians at all who made it big in music after age 30, right? So all the musicians, almost all the musicians I loved had had their big break in music in their 20s. And if they were still doing music after, you know, their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they had gotten their foot in the door in their 20s, right? So that was a problem for me because here I was 30 and I had not yet made it big in music. So I didn't want to give up on a dream that easily. So I kind of kept plugging away at it for a few more years. And the reality slowly started to set in. Oh, hey, this is not going to happen. This dream that you've had for so long, this is not going to happen. It's just not. It's one of those things where, like, I'm 42 now. If I decided that I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast, well, it just wouldn't happen. It just...
I'd watch. Could you please decide to be an Olympic gymnast and then just document your training?
I'm not saying it wouldn't be entertaining. I'm just saying it wouldn't be good. And I certainly wouldn't have much of a shot at being in the Olympics. So there's just some things you just can't do. And so I was like, well, that's it. This dream is dead. So I decide to pass the dream along to another generation, pass the dream along to somebody who can make something of that dream of music, what I could not. So I start volunteering at a music camp for teenagers called Tennessee Teen Rock Camp. And there's a sister camp called Southern Girls Rock Camp. These are really cool camps where we bring in teenagers during the summer, sit them down, teach them how to play instruments, and they go for a week. And at the end of the week, we put them up on stage and they perform for hundreds of paying audience members, full lights and sound. It's really cool. And it's just an amazing, magical experience. And I realized something very important during this experience, which is I loved working with teenagers, and I loved the way that teenagers loved the art that they loved. I loved the way they connect with it. And maybe you remember this from when you were a teenager. Certainly it was the case for me that I connected with the art I connected with on such a profound level. It became part of my identity. It became part of the way I related to the world. It was my lifeblood. And that's how you relate to art when you're a teenager. And
it's you love completely. You are tragically sad. Everything is every fiber. You know, your dream is what you wake up thinking about. If it's crushed, it's never going to be okay again. So I think that it makes sense to me that you write in the young adult world because you were inspired by that passion, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, as a teenager, you just live so close to the bone with all of your emotions. Everything feels so heightened and so immediate and so real and raw and pressing. And they bring that to their love of art. And so I was like, man, it'd be really cool to make art for those people, for teenagers. But my problem here was I knew how to make one kind of art. I knew how to make music. And I did not know how, first of all, I did not know how to make the kind of music that gets marketed to young adults. It's like pop music. It's like Billie Eilish and Post Malone and Taylor Swift and Cardi B. And that's what gets marketed to teenagers. Yeah. Pop music. I don't know how to make that kind of music. And the other thing is that at this point, I was even further past 30, right? I'm well into my mid-30s at this point. I am so far beyond the age that I'm going to be able to make music for teenagers. It's just not going to happen. So I have two choices at this point. I can either, one, just let that hunger die, because sometimes, you know, you just have to die hungry. So I can let that hunger die, that desire to make art for teenagers, and just let it die.
And this is when you walk out of the room and we all cry ourselves to sleep.
Right, exactly.
But chapter two. Or
number two, I can turn my life my creative life upside down and try to find some new artistic discipline, and with a full-time job and full adult responsibilities, a family, all that stuff, I can try to learn a new artistic discipline and do it well enough to reach teenagers. So I chose number two. I decided I decided I would find something else that I could do that would allow me to reach teenagers with art. And I'd always been a big book lover. I worked at bookstores in high school and college. And I realized there's this big category of books called young adult books. And it occurs to me, I bet young adults read young adult books. I bet young adult books get marketed to young adults. So I say, you know what? I'm going to try to write a young adult book. And hey, if I fail, I fail. I've already tasted failure with my music career, and everything was pretty much fine. You know, like, you can fail at things and it's pretty much fine. Nobody's really paying attention, right? Everybody's too caught up in their own lives and their own struggles and their own, you know, hopes and fears and things like that. So hell, I'll just go try to write a book, and if I fail, I fail. I just won't tell anybody. That's the thing. I didn't tell most people that I was writing a book until I announced my book deal, because I didn't want too many people to know. But so that's how I came to the world of young adult books. I chose it based on the audience, not because I just wanted to write a book, not because I had any particular attachment to young adult books. There was not really any young adult book category when I was a young adult. I mean, there was like S.E. Hinton and Judy Blume and stuff, but it didn't exist as a marketing category the way it exists now. So I just wanted to reach that audience. If
I remember we had one little room, Jeff, one little room in our library that was the young adult room. And I read every single book in there probably by the time I was 11. And I'm sure my mom is watching right now. And then, Mom, I graduated by the time I was like 13 to the adult books. You tried to keep me from the world. You tried to keep me watching healthy TV. I found all of the books. But it was a very, I mean, the fact that I could blow through 80 books on a shelf in a year, and that was it compared to what we have now, is pretty amazing. And I love what you're saying about finding a place to put your art. And I think that using the word failure can be scary for people, and saying I failed at is scary for people because it has a negative connotation. It's more, I did that, and now I still have more of me to give. So where do I put that in the world? Who's going to appreciate that? Who do I connect with? And I wanted to have you be part of our launch week because I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with. We say, okay, I went this way. Now I went that way. So does that mean that I failed at that thing? Or does that just mean that I wasn't supposed to do it forever? And
and I've kind of come to reconceptualize my musical career not as a failure, but as a successful prelude to my writing career. And this is actually the first time I'm ever articulating this. This is the debut of my reconceptualization of this. First time I'm articulating it, but it's occurring to me now. I conceptualize it as the prelude to having some moderate modicum of success in writing, in that music taught me that there is a type of story that I tell, right? Like, I can love all kinds of stories. I can love all kinds of music, but there is a kind of music that I make. There is a kind of story that I tell through music. I'm not supposed to tell every kind of musical story. There's a kind of story I tell, and that's important to know as an author. What kind of story do you tell? I think authors really go awry when they don't understand what kind of story they tell, and they try to tell all the stories. You got to try to tell the story that you tell. So that's the first thing it taught me. The second thing it taught me is that there is a way of telling stories that I am drawn to. I have a voice, and I don't need to speak with every voice. I can love other voices in music, in writing. But when I go to write or make music, there is a voice that I need to speak with that is my authentic voice. And as long as I remain true to that voice, I will make the best art that I possibly can. If I don't remain true to that voice, then things get dicey.
Your voice is really distinct. And the first time I read one of your books, I didn't know at the time that you had a career as a singer-songwriter, but there is a musical cadence to your sentences. So that makes sense to me. In retrospect now, hindsight 2020, but one of your most favorite quotes, I'm reading it, and I put it all over to say, look who we have tonight. If you're going to live, you might as well do painful, brave, and beautiful things. And it's an example of how your teenage characters sort of find their philosophy and their place in life. If you're going to live, you might as well do painful, brave, and beautiful things. And I say it again because that's the whole point of these conversations that I want to have. We are cooped up. We're in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of us might even be questioning, do we want to keep doing what we've been doing? How do I switch? So what is the painful, brave, and beautiful thing? And why are they always intertwined? What was the most painful, brave, beautiful thing you did in your life?
Well, I think it was starting down this writing journey. And I added that line. Actually, that line comes from The Serpent King. It actually appears on the cover of the paperback of The Serpent King. And that line appeared kind of late in the writing process. That was not in the earlier drafts. It came late in the process. And I added that line because, in fact, I think I had already sold the book to my editor before I added that line. And I added that line because that's what that journey felt like to me. It was painful to leave music behind. It was painful to risk failure at that point in my life and to try something new. That's painful to do. It's hard to do that. It was painful to think about failing at another artistic discipline. It was painful, though, to think about, more painful, though, to think about not reaching the audience I wanted to reach. So that was painful. Brave, because again, it takes courage not to let the possibility of failure dissuade you from things. You have to be brave enough to confront failure, to get on your horse and ride out and meet the possibility of failure in battle. So that's where that comes in. And no beautiful thing comes without bravery. No beautiful thing comes without pain. Every beautiful thing that we experience comes with pain, and it requires bravery. Every sunset you watch is seconds of your life ticking away toward death, right? Every beautiful thing you experience has an element of pain to it, which is what makes the beautiful things beautiful. If we didn't experience pain in life, there would be no need for beauty. Everything would be beautiful, but beauty stands in contrast to the pain, and beauty comes with pain.
And it's such an interesting thing. I think about that a lot in news because I see so many painful moments and people recover from them and redefine themselves out of it. But even in the simple things, I say loving a child. I have a 4-year-old, and loving a child is saying goodbye to them and hello to them every day.
Yeah.
You say goodbye to a version of them and they wake up. Sometimes it seems the next morning. Overnight they changed and you're like, hello, little human. But where did that baby go? And then I'll have this adult who will be an amazing friend and a comrade in life. But it's a process of saying goodbye. And it's amazing that we love our pets and our dogs and our sunsets and our children and our seasons, and they just keep rolling and changing and disappearing before our eyes. But that is what we do. So why don't we give ourselves that same grace where if we disappear before our eyes, if we change? Sometimes we punish ourselves and we say that wasn't what I set out to do. But I feel like what you're saying is that's okay. Say goodbye. And you can maybe even mourn it a little bit. And you can kind of say, okay, well, that was sad. Or is it? Or is it? Was it just that thing that I did? I want to keep going actually, because you said to me once that you put everything into your books, everything that you sort of observe about people and the human condition and things, the way that you see the world. So there was another quote that I pulled that was from Goodbye Days. And it says, for the most part, you don't hold the people you love in your heart because they rescued you from drowning or pulled you from a burning house. Mostly, you hold them in your heart because they saved you in a million quiet and perfect ways from being alone. So I wanted to ask you the importance of community. You mentioned, at the beginning of this that we met at a conference. And at the beginning of that conference, a lot of the authors there were joking and they were saying we could rename this as the Friends of Jeff Zentner conference, because you had kind of helped craft who you were going to invite, who you thought would get along, who you thought would have chemistry. How important is building that community so you don't feel alone? And what advice do you have for people who might say, where do I fit?
Yeah, I think it's tremendously important. I am very much drawn to the idea of families of choice, the families we build. I think that's really important. And so in some form or another, I've written about that in every one of my books. In The Serpent King, I write about families of choice. In Goodbye Days, I write about the loss of a family of choice. In Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee, I talk about a tiny kind of self-contained family of choice where it's just these two girls against the world and their kind of motley crew that they've surrounded themselves with. In my fourth book, it's another one of those stories where it's just two friends, but it is this little community of two. And I think it's so important. You know, I spent a lot of my time growing up as a pretty lonely kid, like really without community. I wasn't interested in a lot of the things that the other kids were interested in. So it kind of left me kind of on the outside looking in. And I always was really hungry for community. I found community through books. This was in the pre-internet days, so you couldn't go and like get on a chat board and like talk about books with people. You couldn't go on Instagram and talk books with people. I literally found community within the books. Those characters became my community. And so I came to understand the importance of drawing characters that are real enough to serve as a surrogate community for people. But I think it's very, very important. And a lot of times I think as authors, we write the other lives that we wish we could have led, the lives we want to lead. And so in every one of my books, I'm writing a different life that I would love to have led. I'm writing a set of friends I would love to have had, or maybe have had. I'm writing myself a community with these books, and I'm writing the kids who read them a community, I hope.
I think that that is what resonates. And I think that that's why so many people say that they laugh and then you make them cry publicly. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've seen posts on social media saying, "Oh no, another Jeff Zentner book that makes me cry." And you know, I've laughed out loud, especially at the conversations and the dialogue. I've even asked you, you know, how do you make dialogue between teenagers be real? And you've obviously observed it, and we've all been teenagers at some point. But I think that we forget sometimes how introspective and how insightful and poetic teenagers are. You know, I've pulled books off of this shelf and looked, and I'm like, wow, I was really deep when I was 15. I'm probably deeper than I am now, because you're just thinking about where you belong in life. There was another quote. This one is from The Serpent King again. That wouldn't be a bad way to die, giving off light for millions of years after you're gone. So you're thinking about a star. And I think that quote struck me because that's why I want to have these conversations. I think that everybody, whether they admit it or not, wants their light to live on. And it might be a small way, it might be a big way. Maybe somebody wants to be the legitimate star who gets the attention of the world. Maybe somebody just wants a smile from their friend, from their family, from their child. How do you make sense of the big life versus the small life?
I mean, I think a life is as big as you want it to be. I think leading the life you want to live makes it a big life. There's actually in my fourth book, there's a line, I might be able to recite it verbatim. Laid out like this, his life was small and quiet, but it was the life he wanted. It's all about leading the life that you want to live. Sorry, my phone blacked out for a second. I've been having
mine was doing that to me 100 times the other night, and it was just more like, it was like boop, hello, boop. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, it never fails. As soon as I'm talking about something profound, the last time I did one of these Instagram lives, I was starting to read a passage out of one of my favorite books on earth, The English Patient, and both times it started to fritz out on me. I was going absolutely crazy.
This is the universe telling us to not think that we are that insightful. Yeah, don't be so deep. Talk about what you had for breakfast. Be funny. No, but I think it's worth revisiting. You know, as far as how we matter and whether our life is big or small. I mean, I think for me, I remember I was always pushing to be networked, to be known, and the question was asked of me, why? And I said, to prove that I can. To prove that I can. To who? Is the follow-up. And if it's to yourself, well, then great. that's fine. That's a challenge accepted. But if it's to the world, the people who are watching, who are they and what does it matter? You know, there's a small circle of people who are going to remember you and care about you. And I think, if anything, a book is a way to kind of live forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we're all kind of screaming into the void in a way. I mean, if you think about in the grand scale and sweep of the universe, if you think about the size of our lives and the duration of our lives, I mean, we are like firecrackers, if that. I mean, that's the duration and the scope of our life in the sweep of the universe. And it's daunting to think about that. And I think all we can really do in the face of such smallness is create as much beauty as we possibly can. That is the thing. For me, that is the thing. That is the purpose. That is the purpose of life, is to create as much beauty as I possibly can in this explosion of life that I have in this millisecond. I'm here and existing and conscious on the universal scale. I don't know what comes after all this. I don't know if there's some eternal state of being that we live in. I just have no idea. There's no way of knowing that. So I have to prepare for the possibility that I'm a being in a universe that has existed for trillions of years, and I will exist for, you know, hopefully 90. Like, all my grandparents lived into their 90s. I'm pretty healthy. I expect, you know, I'll probably live into my 90s, I hope, knock on wood. But yeah, to me, that's what it's all about.
I need to start sleeping so I can exist for half a firecracker longer. You know, I think that when it comes to searching for happiness, sometimes people are too hard on themselves for what they achieve in a day. And juggling things are hard. And I had a question today from one of the women in the Instagram community. She was wondering, she said, hey, I've written half a book and I can't find the time to finish it. And I promised her I would ask you to share when you wrote your stories and your books and how you got it done, because you're a lawyer by day.
That's right.
And, you know, we're all juggling family and life. So when did you manage to sneak 3 books into the daily fray?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer, and I gave a TED talk about this in 2012. You can go on YouTube and Google Jeff Zentner TEDx, and my TED talk is there. I offered kind of my creative manifesto, which proceeds from the premise that you have to claw back time from the world. The world will never give you time. You have to fight for it. You have to claw it away from the world, and then you have to protect it. You have to protect it as you would a walled garden. That's the metaphor I use for this, for my way of conceptualizing this creative space that you have to maintain and protect in your life. But you have to maintain that walled garden. And my way of maintaining that walled garden is to constantly be examining my day, looking at the hours of my day, and looking at where I can steal away little bits of time for creativity. So my books, I wrote on my phone, on my iPhone, kind of like this one, on the bus to and from my day job. I just get out my phone.
You wrote it on your phone. Prove that you can still straighten your fingers. You have the use of your thumbs.
Yeah, I have to use, well, I only use my right thumb. So about 90% of my creative output has been created by my right thumb. So I type with my right thumb on the way to work, and that's how I do my drafting. And when I get home, I go for a walk or a run, and that's a good time to kind of clear my head and contemplate, think about where I'm going to go with my story the next day. It's a time when I think of, when words just come to me, it's a time of openness, when I'm open to receiving things. I'm outside, I'm feeling the sun on my face, I'm seeing the night sky, the stars. It's a way of gaining perspective. It's a way of quieting my mind so that I can receive things. I think too often nowadays, we don't give our minds the space to be quiet. Boredom is a really great way to be creative, and we're never bored anymore because we all carry around these smartphones, which I'm not anti-smartphone. I just got done telling you that I write my books on my phone. But what this device does is it kills boredom instantly. You never have to be bored. And as humans, we're always trying to avoid boredom, right? The minute we get bored, pull out that phone, start texting somebody, start doing something else. But the problem with that is that boredom is a form of hunger. It's a form of mental hunger. And when we're bored, our minds will start to create its own food to feed that hunger. And so often that food can take the form of creativity. It can take the form of inspiration. So if you cut off that process and you give your brain food by, looking at Twitter or whatever, you cut off that process and you rob your brain of the opportunity to create its own food in the form of creativity. So I go on these walks, I allow myself to be bored, and I come back every time with some inspiration. I got the title to my 4th book, In the Wild Light, on a walk. I was just walking one night and I was watching the sunset and just thinking what a beautiful and magical thing it was to exist in that moment, to be watching the sunset in that moment, to be a spectator of these incredible celestial processes whereby I was watching a planet circle a giant star that provided me with light. And I was just watching that and looking at the beautiful light. And the phrase, in the wild light, just came to me suddenly. And I just knew that was the title of my 4th book. So I engineered that phrase into the book to make sure that I could use it as the title. But my point is that I use exercise time as creative time. When I'm doing the dishes, I'm thinking about characters, I'm thinking about story. When I'm on the bus, I'm writing. And all of this is time that would otherwise just be wasted, right? You have to be really mindful about the way that you use your time and not let it go to waste. And so with that time that is ordinarily just waste time during the day, that's when I do my creating.
And I love what you said about clawing it back, because I know that I've gotten frustrated where I feel like I have to steal the time for probably the thing that I love the most. And why do I need, to borrow time for my passion for writing? And it's the last thing that I do at the end of the day, or I sneak it in somewhere. But I think that if you look at it as a victory, hey, I clawed my way up that mountain, I dug into that cave, I tunneled in there, and I stayed there for even 2 seconds. I think it's a better way to frame it up, Look at it as you got in there and you stole the treasure, It's not a bad thing that you have to steal it. Life is busy. We have bills to pay, we have jobs to keep, and we have things to do. So
absolutely.
Feeding the soul while we're bored. And I was bored as a kid, and I wonder sometimes about our own children, are they bored enough to be creative? Because I think that's where it's a really good point. And every time I was bored, whether it was on a long airplane ride to India to visit my family or a quiet rainy afternoon, I grew up in the woods. I didn't have a neighborhood to play in. And that was when I drew pictures, and that was when I made up stories, and that was when I acted out those stories and ran around, and I still do, as I'm trying to steal that 1 second,
exactly.
10 minutes of time. But I think that's the answer, is you just have to, you have to not take no for an answer. So for when people say, do you have time? How do you have time? It's not work, right? You love it. It's a treat,
Right.
it's dessert. So I say, you might go downstairs and watch a movie and have a glass of wine. I want to write a book, and that's as decompressing for me as watching something. Not to say that I don't like to watch other things too, but it's as relaxing. It's not work.
Yeah.
So I guess if it feels like work, don't do it in that moment. Maybe do it in a different moment. Your head isn't there. On that note, how do you write in terms of focusing on a book, focusing on work? Do you put it all into one story? Do you dabble in several? Or when you're in, are you in?
When I'm in, I'm in. I joke that I have creative pregnancies. I get an idea for one book, and I have to see it through to the end, get it completely out and into the world before I can even think about another project. I don't balance multiple projects. I give everything to that one project. And I realized it is because I put everything I've got into the book in front of me. Because I don't know if I'm going to have another book. I don't know if I'm going to get hit by a bus tomorrow and die. I don't know how many more books. So every book I write says everything I have to say at that moment, which is why it takes me a little while between books. I have to let the well refill. I have to let the account refill, because I spend the account completely in every book. And anything that spills over the edge gets put in the next book. But that's kind of how I have to do it. And because of that, I go months without writing. I'm not one of these writers. I'm not like a Stephen King writer who's going to tell you, oh, you have to write every day to be a real writer. I think that's nonsense. I don't think you have to write every day to be a real writer. I write when I have something to say. And I consider a lot of things to be writing. I consider the 3 or 4 months that I spend before putting pen to paper, metaphorically speaking, just thinking about the characters, because that's the only way I know how to write a novel, is to cheat and let somebody else write it for me, and that somebody else is my characters. I could not sit down across from any real person. I couldn't sit down across from you and say to you, Sorboni, let me tell you who you are. Let me tell you where you've been, where you're going, who you love, what you fear, what you desire. I can't tell you those things about yourself. I can listen while you tell me those things about yourself, and then I can write those down, and that becomes a very natural and organic story, because a human life is full of the things that make good stories. They're full of tension, they're full of stakes, they're full of romances and heartbreaks and enemies and all that good stuff that makes a good story. So if you can conceptualize characters as real people and write the stories that they dictate to you, then that naturally makes a good story. So I don't really know how to write a story other than to listen to characters and write down what they tell me about themselves. And so I consider myself to be on the clock when I am listening to those voices in my head. I'm not writing a word. I'm not trying to write down what they're telling me. I am just listening as they become real people in my mind. And in my opinion, I'm on the clock when I'm doing that.
And when someone reads those characters, they are caring about them. And I think that that's a really important message that you have about an artist's role in society. If ever someone doubts the importance of what they're writing, whether it's an image in a poem that strikes somebody in a certain way and brings them back to a place or makes them wonder about something, or they are vested in those characters that you created and they cry when those characters' hearts are broken and they're rooting for them to find that romance. It's interesting because we are caring about people that don't exist.
Yeah, it is such an exercise in empathy. I think people who love books are such incredible superheroes of empathy, because they can bring themselves to care about people who don't even exist, people who exist only as, black ink symbols on white slices of processed wood pulp. They can care about people who exist only in that form. To me, that's a superhero level power of empathy. People who lack empathy don't love stories. They don't have favorite movies. They don't have favorite books. They don't love stories because stories hold nothing for them. Stories demand empathy.
And if there is a lack of empathy in society, I think that could drive an author or an artist, even if it's not an author and it's the words on the page. Maybe it's a painting, maybe it's, spoken word, maybe it's other things too. And I think to broaden it out to people who are watching right now who might not write, it's just about conveying something that's universal. And it might even be as simple as, hey, this is a recipe that I love. Isn't this delicious? And now you've suddenly shared that love with someone. Or look at what the sky was doing when I was running next to the ocean, and then somebody feels something there too. So it keeps going on from there. But what is the end goal then? Is the happily ever after just mattering? Is the happily ever after finding the beauty that you mentioned, finding as much beauty as you can while you are that little firecracker in the universe?
For me, it is all about creating beauty and bringing beauty to other people to connect with over. That's what it's all about to me. That's what the whole purpose of all of this is. That is the purpose of life, is to identify that beauty in the world, to create, to put it in stories, to put it in characters, to identify it so that people can say, hey, you know what, I find that beautiful too. And then you can both kind of exist in a little moment of beauty. For me, that's what it's all about. And that connection. And again, it goes to the community, building community. It's about building connection, building community, and just making this world a little bit easier to live in. This is a hard world to live in. It's a frightening world. There are invisible viruses swirling around our heads trying to kill us. There are, trials and tribulations. There is so much difficulty in this world that we have to kind of claw back moments of beauty, just like we have to claw back moments of time, as we were talking about earlier. You have to claw back moments and instances of beauty. And that's, to me, that's my whole job as an author, is to do that and to package them for other people to experience and just make this world a little bit better place.
Because that's what makes it easier to do the other half of what I'm talking about here, which is to slay the dragons. I mean, if you can hold on to the beauty when the dragons, rear their ugly heads, it's that much easier to just grab them by the face and smash them back down. If somebody is experiencing a lot of doubt, what do you suggest that they do? How do you slay your dragons? Because we all have that. You wake up in the morning. I'll wake up in the morning and one day I'm like, all right, I've got this together. I'm doing okay. And then the next morning I'll wake up and be like, I'm falling apart and I didn't do any of those things that I said I was going to do. And I'm not going to achieve that goal. And we're hard on ourselves. So how do we get the dragons to go away, to shut up, to never come back? Or do they just always come back? We have to kind of manage.
I mean, I think they always come back. I think the thing is you just have to do it. You just have to do the thing and understand that sometimes you're going to fall on your face. Sometimes you're going to fail. But you have to do it because we are all marching inexorably toward death. Every day, every hour, by the end of this conversation, you and I will both be an hour closer to death than we were before.
I gotta go.
And it's a grim thought, but it should also, I think, be a motivating thought, that we get to inhabit a consciousness for this limited space of time. After this life is over, I don't know if we get to inhabit a consciousness. I certainly hope we do, but I don't know. So I'm going to make as much of my opportunity to inhabit this consciousness as I possibly can. And inhabiting a consciousness is really fun. It's exciting. New things happen in the world. Beautiful things happen in the world. Even the bad things that happen in the world remind you that things that you don't expect can suddenly happen out of nowhere. Even the bad things can remind you of that. And so, to me, that's how I slay the dragons, is by remembering what a limited time I have here, what a short amount of time I have, and making the absolute most of it that I possibly can.
That's the way to flip the script, right? Instead of fearing it, embrace it and say, let's live it while it counts. Let's live it while we can. What's interesting, there's a moment where I was like, wait a second. This whole thing, I'm a fraud. I'm saying find your fairy tale and you're happily ever after. Have you read the original fairy tales? They are the darkest, most twisted, strange little pieces of storytelling that you could ever imagine. And then I kind of made myself feel better, where I was like, no, this is what we do. We take ugly stories and we turn them into fairy tales at the point that we've evolved to in our thought, where we're comforting each other. They've gone from stories to scare our children into going to bed and to teach lessons about, obeying and whatever it was. But some of them are very disturbing, to say the least. So I was laughing where I was like, oh gosh, I'm telling people, find your fairy tale. Has anyone read the original Sleeping Beauty? I don't even know if I want to ruin their image of that Disney world. So I think that's just another way of saying, hey, we take what's given to us that's ugly. And as artists and authors and just good friends and good people, we make the best of it, right?
That's right.
Jeff, you're the best. Thank you for doing this with me.
You're the best. Thank you for having me. I love this. I hope you keep doing this and thousands and thousands of people tune in. You deserve it.
I hope they do too, because I think that it's a fun way to figure stuff out together. And I love being able to dip into people's brains and kind of forage around for a little while, find the golden nuggets and share them with everybody. Next week, we're changing gears. We talked to two authors this week, and next week, Jeff, we're talking to, you might have seen me share her on social media. Have you heard of The Real Indian Dad and Sheena Melwani?
No.
She plays piano and she sings beautifully. And then her life, her songs get interrupted by a very cantankerous, absolutely hilarious dad, the real Indian dad, who calls her out on all her bad habits. And it became, she launched to like 1 million, I'm not even kidding, 1 million TikTok followers. And she cracked me up. And so I reached out. I was like, you're funny. And it turned out, guess what? She kind of believes the same thing that you believe, that I believe, that Kim, who we talked to on Tuesday, Kim Jones, an author, and Geely Siegel believe, which is there's no such thing as failure. It's just redirection. You have to love yourself. You have to build a community, and you have to have fun and find beauty in it all. So there's definitely going to be that theme as we go along. So that's my contribution to philosophy in the yap thing that I've learned how to do. So thank you. And we'll be posting this, guys. So definitely, if you missed any of it, Jeff had awesome, incredible insight, and you can go back and listen to it all.
Thank you. This was such an honor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being willing to join me on Launch Week. You never know what could have happened.
You never know, but I figured if you were involved, it would be good.
We'd have fun at least.
Yeah.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye-bye, everyone. Mwah.